What is up, YouTube? Welcome back to the Cutlass Project build series, where I take this Cutlass cruiser wagon that I found in this dude's backyard that's been collecting dust for a couple years and start resurrecting this thing. I'm building this car to be my next power tour car. I'm a big fan of wagons, and these cars are super nostalgic to me, so I really wanted to try and build one of these things. These cars are super unique, and I'm really into that. In the last few videos, you guys saw me tear this car apart. I built engine mounts for the 3000 and the F23 5-speed manual, built the exhaust for the turbo to make that thing fit in this car, then built an intake to actually get this thing placed where I wanted it to be. So in the very last video, you guys saw me put together the engine. I figured out which one I'm going to use for the car for now. Hopefully that lasts. And then I went ahead and put the clutch in the car, put the transmission back on the engine, and dumped the whole thing back inside of the engine bay. And then from there, went ahead and just put together some coil brackets for this thing for the LSX style coils. This video, we're going to put the exhaust back on the car, put axles in the car, and then finally just wrap the exhaust up to finally protect it from all that heat in that very tight transmission tunnel. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and dive into this project. Alright guys, so in this video I'm going to be working on getting some stuff done to get the exhaust in the car and get the engine basically plumbed and buttoned up. Working on a couple things with the AC system. It's not working out as well as I thought it would, so I've got a solution in the mail on the way, so we'll get to that later. I'll do like a whole little series about that, or a mini video about that probably. Going to be using the V5 compressor in this car, going to be using the W body power steering pump, and all the accessories for a W body. So as far as like the engine brackets go, this car is basically going to think it's in the W body. It's going to work like it's in the W body, aside from the whole manual transmission thing and the coil pack here. So my goal is to get this thing plumbed and basically ready to go for wiring. So get the engine basically all settled in here, everything bolted up, and that's going to be a whole thing actually. So I won't be able to get the radiator in here until I get the AC stuff worked out. It's just so much easier to get to all this while it's in there. So the next goal really is to get the exhaust in the car. And to do that, I need to sort out the transmission stuff. So get the wiring sorted out. I got some of that stuff plugged in. I got some fluid in here too. So the fluids should be all set. I put about 2.5 quarts in there. I think they called for 2.4, so I guesstimated it around 2.5. So I'll got that sorted out. Need to get the shifter cables on there, get those through the firewall too. Then I think from there I can actually just start putting back the exhaust back in the car and start moving on to some of the plumbing. So the first thing I needed to do to put the exhaust in the car permanently was to clearance this AC compressor area on the front manifold. Basically I just heat this thing up with a torch and then just started hammering this thing down. Alright, so I've got the turbo back in the car again, and all of the exhausts, and the wastegate's a tight fit. I'm not sure if that's going to cause any issues. I'm hoping it doesn't cause some sort of cracks or anything like that, but otherwise though, this stuff is all basically in here. The downpipe is in too, which means I can go ahead and start heat wrapping things and try and make sure that I protect everything as much as possible from all that heat. And before I do that though, I want to go ahead and just get everything else that's in there, or that's going to be in there. And one of the things I've been dying to check out is if these axles are going to fit. So I have 2 axles for a 5-speed manual Cutlass A-body car. They had a 282 for 2 years for the Cutlass and the 6000, but there was 1 year or 2 years in particular where you could get it with the bigger brake option, which is important because the bigger brakes have 27 spline hubs instead of 31. And I'm pretty sure those are the numbers. So there's 2 different hubs you can get for this car. There's a 5x115 and a 5x110 or a 5x100. This one has the bigger brakes. It's the Wagon, so it's got the bigger brakes, and it's got the 5x115 hubs. So it has the lower spline count, which is counterintuitive, but that's what this has. So there was 1 year of the 6000 / Cutlass Sierra car that you could get this with the 5-speed and also that that brake option, and one manufacturer that makes the right axles for it. So I'm really crossing my fingers hoping these fit, because this is kind of the whole reason why I did this swap in this car, is because I knew it would be somewhat cheap and easy to get a good manual or a good transmission that's going to be able to take the kind of power that the 3000 is going to make with the turbo. The 4T65 isn't really going to last with this kind of power unless you spend like $4,000 on it, $3,000 on it to make it actually beefy. I've got $500 into this transmission, about $100 in axles. This should be a better swap. And I already had the clutch. The clutch was free for me. So that's why the swap makes sense. So this is kind of a big moment here, is if this is going to work, because if this doesn't work, this means I need to make custom axles, which is going to be a very expensive endeavor probably. If these don't fit, I could still try and find an off-the-shelf one that might work, but really cross your fingers there at that point and really dig into the rabbit hole. And these things are not, I don't know how you can even like look up axle lengths right now, so that would be a journey to say the least. So I'm going to go ahead and try and fit these things in the car. That's the passenger side one there, and this is the driver's side, so the shorter one goes over here, and then the longer one goes on the opposite side there. So you just have that short length to this thing. So I'll go ahead and pop out those covers and hope we don't drain fluid everywhere, and go ahead and pop these things in and hope that they all work out. All right, so I think I'm going to call it a night here. I got the axles in the car. They fit pretty well. The driver's side's a little long, and I feel like these things stick out way too freaking much, but otherwise, though, they fit nicely. They sealed in the transmission. They fit the transmission. They fit the car, and the length seems about right. So I think I have a winner here with these axles, and this might actually all work out. So stars have aligned on this thing. What's interesting is that I bought this transmission a couple months ago. You can't get them now, so they're discontinued, which is surprising. So sorry for those of you who are wanting to do something like this. You're gonna have a harder time finding these things now, but they're out there though. So, but the axles fit. It's all bolted in. I still need to go ahead and swap the brakes over, and then I can be done with all of the axles and stuff. I'm gonna call it a night here though, guys, and pick it up later. So with the exhaust bolted into the car, it was time to look at protecting the rest of the car from it. There's a lot of parts of this exhaust that are really tight against like that heater box back there. They're tight against the brake booster down here as well, so things are not in the best position for heat. So what I'm planning to do here is I'm going to use some heat wrap on all this exhaust to cover the top of it, to mostly protect it from that box up there. Brake booster too, some other components down here are pretty tight against it. Typically what I do is I use a fiberglass wrap, but this time on this car, I'm going to be trying this stuff right here. This comes from Heat Shield Products. I've heard about this a little bit. I was looking for something that really replicates what the factory does. It's the closest thing I've seen that I can do myself without going and paying somebody to do something and having a relatively OEM style of a finished product, right? So this is pretty similar to what the factory does in the crossover. They have like an aluminum piece that covers it with a bunch of fiberglass inside of it. So that's kind of what this is. I don't think this is even fiberglass. It looks just like the stuff they did in the factory crossover. So from what I've seen, this stuff brings the temperatures down quite a bit, and I know it's better than that than the fiberglass heat tape. So this is what I'm going to use in this car. So I'm going to try and do this as neat as possible. So to do that, I'm going to be using some of this paper right here to try and figure out what this is all going to look like. So I'll cut out basically templates out of this. This is just, I've never done this before, by the way, so this is all new to me. I think this is going to help out in situations like this, where you have a lot of area you want to cover, but don't want to make like too many pieces. So basically all I'll do is I'll cut out what I'm going to actually cover with this and figure out what that's going to look like, and then I'll basically transfer it over to the heat wrap. I mean, some of the best stuff you've seen out there for heat shielding is probably the same stuff, but they will laser weld together. Obviously, I can't do that, so I'm just going to use like a stainless steel zip tie type thing. So same thing you use on the fiberglass tape. Basically, I'm going to try and cover all of this as one unit. I'm probably not going to need all of this here, but the tunnel especially is going to need it. This area especially is what I'm worried about the most. But this is probably going to be fine. I could probably go without covering this stuff up, but I probably will cover it up right in there though, at least. I've got my ratchet strap here to hold the engine forward so I can rock the whole thing forward and get a bit more clearance here. So got all the little tricks in the book for this thing. So I'm going to get to it, guys, and hopefully have a finished, decent looking product. Okay, so I think I've got most of this relatively well set here. This stuff is a lot easier to work with than the typical exhaust strap is, that fiberglass tape. It is still messy. It does still like itch. You get the white stuff in your hands and your elbows and your arms, and you'll feel it still, but it's still a lot more user-friendly than the other stuff. Supposedly, this stuff will shield off down to about 200 degrees, and supposedly the other stuff, the fiberglass tape, does about 400. This is kind of what it looks like. So you have that layer of this material. It's got to be fiberglass, right? I'm not really sure what it is, honestly, but then you have that layer of aluminum on top too as well. So you have that going for it. Obviously not the most professional looking installation, but it's going to be good enough. There's still some places where it's not completely covered up, right? So I'm not sure if that's going to be an issue or not. So my biggest concerns were this heater box here, the brake booster, the brakes, just trying to keep all this stuff pretty cool. And I think I've got enough clearance here. I did go ahead and leave the front of the car pretty well exposed. I'm not as concerned about heat up front here anywhere. The only place I might be concerned about it is right in here, but it is pretty close to the intake manifold. But that whole area is cooled off by the coolant that passes through it, so it might not be a big deal. I did miss one spot just down here where the exhaust gets pretty close to the vapor line for the air conditioning. So I need to sort that out. Worried about the shifter cables too down here. So that's kind of tight against that. I did wrap this thing pretty tight in here, which probably kind of defeats some of the purpose of the wrap. And thankfully heat goes up, so I've got that going for me too there in that situation. So maybe it won't be so bad. But otherwise, I think the wrap is going to be sufficient for this. I think I've got a pretty good setup here right now. So with the exhaust literally wrapped up now, I can start moving on to the next things, which are going to be things like plumbing, electrical, a bunch of other little small nitty-gritty things. So I'll try and push out some more updates more often, but that's going to do it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.